Today by my colleagues, Mr. Paul Koretz and Mr. Bernard Parks. I believe Mr. Labange is also on his way. Mr. Krikorian won't be here today. Let me start with my traditional roll call. Who in the past 2 weeks has taken mass transit to work? Nice. Dash shuttle system? Anybody? Commuted to work or to shopping by bicycle? All right. Any carpool? Mr. Koretz reminded me of that one. So, okay. One note of good news. Just want to mention, folks have probably already heard it, that the Wasserman Foundation has agreed to donate $500,000 towards continued ciclovias in the city of Los Angeles. So, one of the best alternative transportation and community building events in Los Angeles will continue to thrive. So, we will begin. We are now joined by Mr. Labange. I was kind of vamping until you got here.
Thank you.
I'm going to, if there's no objection, continue item number 6 at the request of Mr. Blumenfield, the maker of the motion. Is that okay with everybody?
Thank you.
And does anybody have any objection to moving item number 5 on consent?
Just on, wait, we're on number 6. I see Department of Transportation is here. There's a vehicle at a traffic island at Barham and Forest Lawn Drive. If it could be a red curb all the way around. If you could check it out, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Just ask one thing on number 6.
Yes.
Could we ask, when this comes back, if we could have, it seems as though we've been preempted at least twice on this issue. And the years, I think it was a court decision several years ago, and now there was legislation, and now it appears from the notes we're preempted again. I would just like to find out if, from transportation, whether this issue is something that is going to become a reality or not, because I know the courts threw it out for almost the same reasons that we're saying this current preemption. We just ask that you don't have to.
So we're not taking the item now. We're just saying we're going to continue it when it comes back. If you could just report back on that as well.
Look at the history and find out if it seems like it's identical.
Okay, great. So we'll continue item 6, item 5 on consent. And we will begin with the regular agenda, and we'll start with item number 1.
Item number 1 is a Weaser Buscaino motion relative to the goal, objectives, administration, and implementation of the Major Transit and Transportation Construction Impact Area Traffic Management Program and the operation of the Major Transit and Transportation Construction Traffic Management Committee.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mike Brown with the Bureau of Engineering, here to give the report. This is for Council File 130985, and in the motion.
Let me just sort of explain what the motion is for folks, and unless you're going to explain what the motion is.
No, that's fine. No, go ahead.
Okay. This was a Weaser motion seconded by Mr. Buscaino, which was put in to review the fees and the process that is used for the Transportation Construction Traffic Management Committee system. There was some concern about whether or not those fees were appropriate and were being applied reasonably, and so Mr. Weaser asked that this committee, through this motion, get a report back examining what the process is and how that works. So that's just the setup for you.
All right, thank you. We identified 3 main components of the motion. What we were asked to do was to report back, investigate and report back. We were looking at one component was the goals and objectives, the administration and implementation, and the analysis of the permit fee structure associated with the development projects. For the goals and objectives, the purpose, of course, for the Municipal Code Section 62.250 is to minimize the loss of traffic capacity resulting from major transit and transportation projects or construction activity. Now, this is achieved by a special review of permit activity within the city streets by what we refer to as the TCTMC, which is less of a mouthful. So the TCTMC is composed of LADOT, BOE, Bureau of Street Services, and of course the Bureau of Contract Administration. BOE is the bureau who chairs the TCTMC. In accordance with the municipal code, when a major construction project, transportation or public works project, is nearing construction phase, the TCTMC identifies the streets that are essential for safe and efficient movement of traffic within, across, or through the areas impacted by the project. These are referred to as streets of significance. These are identified on an impact area map, which is identified and authorized through the Board of Public Works. Currently, there are 6 of these activities known as impact area maps. Each one is in a different part of the city and is related to a different construction project. When the permit applicants apply for a BO permit or a Bureau of Street Services street use permit on any of the streets of significance, they are referred to the TCTMC. They do an additional review and approval. The applicants attend the committee meetings and where the committee members look at the application, they engage in a dialogue, and they take a look at the project and see where we can minimize the impact of traffic. They take a look at the worksite traffic control and they put conditions and approve that worksite traffic control plan. This is supposed to minimize the traffic impacts within the streets of significance. Now, before the permit is issued, the fees are collected in accordance with the LA Municipal Code. The traffic management fee is $275 per lane reduction per daylight weekday per city block. There is no fee charged for weekdays, holidays, or night work, and there is no fees collected if there's no impact to traffic. For example, if you shut down a parking lane, there's not affect the traffic, therefore no fees are collected for that.
But a busier street is not assessed a higher fee than a less busy street?
That is correct. It's all the same fee, $275. Now, the no-fee permits comprised about 42% of the permits issued during a 10-year period between fiscal years 0304 and 012. As far as the analysis of the permit fee structure associated with development projects, in accordance with the code, the fee is collected for the purpose of recovering city costs associated with manning or running the TCTMC. The fee is established in accordance with the city's financial policy, which requires that fees be based on the full recovery of the total cost of operations. A fee study was conducted in fiscal year 10-11 and then again in September of 2013. And what we found was that the September 2013 study showed that over the last 10 years of data we reviewed for revenues and expenditures, the overall cost recovery for this program is about 88%. Now, we don't recommend increasing the fee at this time because these years tend to be cyclic. Sometimes we the fees exceed staff costs. Some years staff costs exceed the fees recovered. So we would recommend that we wait another 1, 2, or more years and take a look, especially since the recent fee increase, and see whether or not we're actually recovering costs or not. Besides recovering fees, one of the components or one of the reasons for the fee and the TCTMC is to create a strong incentive for contractors and construction activities to limit the use of having to close down the lanes. This helps encourage them to do their work on nights, on weekends, and by doing so, we feel that the 42% no-fee permits is an indication that this seems to be working. We have been able to work with contractors to try and do their work outside of normal daylight hours, do it on weekends and nights. So we feel that the incentive does work somewhat. And in terms of the management fees on development projects, This fee is the same fee that we apply to any projects within the Streets of Significance. This includes development projects, it includes utility projects, includes city projects, Bureau of Sanitation. And
City has to pay you?
Yes, absolutely, because they have to come through the same process, the TMC, to have their work also reviewed. That's pretty much concludes the report. I'm open for questions.
Let me first call up a representative from CD 14, the maker of the motion, Sarah Hernandez.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sarah Hernandez, I'm the Downtown Area Director for Councilman Weaser. I just kind of want to lay a little context for why this motion came about. As was restated, the Streets of Significance is to reduce the traffic impacts on major metro projects like the Regional Connector. Hope Street was designated a Street of Significance last September because of the Regional Connector project. Unfortunately, the council member and his predecessor before that, Jan Perry, had been working very closely with a number of projects on Hope Street, including the Broad Museum, the related project, the Grand Avenue project, and then Wood Partners, which is on Hope and 8th. Those developments were underway before this designation of the Street of Significance. So it's caused some significant problems for those particular developments. Deborah Cantor from the Broad Foundation couldn't be here today, and neither could Related, but she did want to pass on a message that, when Broad started this project, they estimated about $12,000 in street closure fees. They're now being charged through the Streets of Significance designation, $172,000. All of this goes towards the financing of the TMTCP committee, which is what they're required to go through when they want to go through the road closure process. If you think about it, it's a little bit confusing about why these fees are being paid for in the first place. So in collaboration with the mayor, the previous mayor's office, and our office, we submitted this motion, the council members submitted this motion in order to get just a really good basic understanding of what costs go into this committee. If these fees are to make sure that we are budget neutral and we are paying for this committee, what exactly are the costs that these projects are paying for? So that's just the basic context.
And have you seen the report they've prepared?
Actually, this particular report right here, I think what we're looking for and the ultimate solution is to find a way where we can look at how these different projects, whether it's $172,000 for Broad or the varying costs for Related, and how that matches up with these specific costs that go into this particular committee.
Did you have anything you wanted to say in response?
Right now the committee is following the municipal code. We have no discretion. We apply the fees as they are, as we're supposed to per the municipal code, and that's basically what we're following. If council feels that, there need to be changes and the municipal code has changed, the ordinance has changed, we would follow that ordinance.
You're saying it's a policy decision, so it's up to us.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Yeah.
But, as I said in the report, and a lot of it, I think it is successful. I think we are able to reduce the impact on the community by implementing these fees. We have some major projects, and it's not just metro projects. It's city projects as well. Wilshire BRT, and it's going to have a Streets of Significance around that project in conjunction with the Purple Line. I think that it is successful as a deterrent, and it gives the city staff an opportunity to work with the developers and with the contractors to try and minimize the impact of the community. Sometimes, and we've heard contractors say, well, wow, $275 a day, even when we're at $100,000, it's so much cheaper than if they weren't allowed to work in the street at all, and they'd have to go out and spend $1 million on a specialized crane to do the work.
Okay, thank you. Mr. LaBonge?
What does the building community think?
They come into the TCTMC, and they go through the process, and they work with us. I mean, we really...
What do you think they think? I'd like to have a representative from them there. I just think it's, the money that I would love to see us do is if there was a charge of a significant project, that we would hire time for traffic officers to move traffic safely through the intersections. That is the key. I don't know what you could do at a desktop other than when the plans are first approved, but what currently happens is people get impacted. Right now, the biggest significance in downtown is at 7th and Figueroa and the whole corner where the Stadler Hotel was. And then the other safety issue is when there's displacement of sidewalks, like the Broad, there's no sidewalk, so people have to cross to go to the east side of Grand. So I don't know what's our objective here and how long we've had this ordinance.
1988.
Yeah.
I believe
Refer
it's
to my...
1988.
Yeah, I believe that's true, 1988.
Yeah.
I-
And what does MTA think about it? Because, you know, I mean, it's the thing I hate about charging to other government, it costs you more to charge government. You know, and it's the same people's money. It makes me want to, I say a bad word, but I don't want to say a bad word. Because I think it's the same people's money. So if
Right.
LA Unified, are you going to try to charge LA Unified if they're building a school?
Yes.
You know, and I just think it's the same people's money, how you can't figure that out. It just, every time we breathe, you're going to charge somebody for something. And I just think and I don't see $275 per hour or per day?
No, per day.
Per day, $275 per
block.
day for a 9-month period for a school, so that adds to the cost to the to the development. Does Long Beach charge this, or Riverside
I don't know.
City? I think we should know that as a committee, because I think if we want to be business-friendly, which all we talk about, you know, I'd just like to hear from, and some, as you said, Mr. Engineer, forgive me for your...
I'm sorry, Mike Brown.
Thank you, I know, Michael. You said they'd like to come in, they'd rather pay that than hiring a specialized crane, because they got the work area. Fine.
If they weren't allowed to work in the street at all. If they
No,
weren't
I
allowed
just would love to hear
be at
that
all.
from the BBA, I forget what is the, BOMA, I think is Building Owners and Maintenance, or somebody like this, to say that this is something that they want to see done. Anyway, what are we going to do today on this, Mr. Chair?
Well, it's up to the will of the committee. I'll hear what the other members say. I just want to state, we could ask them to come back with additional information, for sure. I just want to clarify my understanding of this, is that the purpose of this program and this fee schedule is both to recover city costs and also to, in a way, to discourage other activity that makes it more complicated to get done the major projects like the downtown connector and stuff.
Exactly. It is to discourage, to try and limit the amount of time a construction project closes down a travel lane during weekdays.
Which is, in and of itself, by discouraging that, a benefit to commuters, to the folks who work downtown, and ultimately to the businesses that function downtown.
Correct.
Mr. Kretz?
If I could just interject
Sure.
really quickly. Because the Broad can't be here, and I'm just reading from an email that Deborah Cantor just sent, the purpose of the Streets of Significance designation is to make sure that we're discouraging projects while we have other major metro projects, public infrastructure projects underway. These fees would be understandable if, and this is coming from Broad, if the project was interfering in any way with metro work. However, that Metro Regional Connector work is not going to commence until the Broad completes theirs. So that $245 per day is not necessarily discouraging any sort of work that's going on simultaneously. This is one project that's happening subsequently to another project being completed.
There are utility relocations going on right now. Even though the actual physical work has not started, advanced utility relocations have begun.
On Hope.
Okay. Mr. Kretz?
Yeah, maybe I'm missing it, but I'm still confused as to how the fees are applied to projects and why the amounts are what they are and how much discretion the review committee actually has.
The review committee really has no discretion as far as it goes, as far as applying the fees. We follow the municipal code, and that is the $275 per block per lane, excuse me, per daylight hour. That's what we charge per the municipal code. And I'm sorry, what your other question was, why are they collected? It is collected to try
No,
and...
how are they applied to projects?
Oh, I'm sorry.
On what
As
basis?
a project, once the streets of significance have been established through the Board of Public Works and they are added to the municipal code, then any construction project, they are put in they are flagged so that if an applicant asks for a construction permit and they're doing work within the street and they are going to close down a travel lane during that period of time when they're affected, they have to go through the committee, the TCTMC, and they review their traffic plan. Because the committee knows about other projects in the area, the goal is to work with the contractor to reduce the amount of time that they will actually shut down a lane. In cases where the contractor has no choice but to shut down a lane, then they have to pay that fee. And that fee has to be paid before the permit is issued.
And when did we first start this process?
It was, sorry, could I have my report?
Yes, 1988.
On my
1988?
notes. It was 1988, I believe so, and I believe the motion says it does.
Yeah,
So we've been doing this in this exact way since 1988.
I believe that the committee was established 2003.
So it was started in 1988, but this process
This
began
process
in
of going through the
2003.
committee was established in 2003 by a change of the ordinance.
So as an example, why would the road project have anticipated a number that's so different from what they're actually being assessed?
I couldn't answer that. We do give per ordinance, we do advertise 30 days in advance, and we do outreach and let people know. Now, I know the road building was planned much further than that, and, you know, we really don't go much more than 30 days because most of these projects are not under our control. They're metro projects or other projects, and we don't have control as to when construction will actually begin. But we do give a minimum of 30 days notice, and we contact utility companies. We advertise it at our permit counters. We put it on our website, so on and so on.
So do we know what caused the disparity, or?
Yeah, the road project was started way beyond September of 2012. So when these costs are projected, the Streets of Significance designation was made when these projects were well underway. So what had been penciled out before for street closure fees, there was no anticipation. 30 days was not nowhere near the amount of time that it would take for them to really account for that. So,
So the Streets of Significance piece of it, when did that get implemented first?
For this particular area?
When did we create this, and when was it in force in this particular area?
Or for this area, for the area where the road building is at?
September.
September?
last.
Okay. I think September of last year?
I believe it was.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And why did we create this particular process? Was it what wasn't working that required us to create the Streets of Significance and the higher cost?
It was really in an effort to lessen the impact on communities where we have major transportation projects that take up, where we already have a lot of construction activity going on the streets. There's already a big impact to the community. My understanding is that this process was brought about to lessen the impact to the community by creating the Streets of Significance. It's not just a matter of collecting the fees and discouraging, it's also a matter of going through the process, having them come through the committee, take a look at their traffic plan, and see if there's other ways that they can, other times that they can do construction within a travel lane. So really the intent, as my understanding, was to lessen the impact on the community. Now the other stuff, as far as the fees and all that, and to try and recover costs, was a result of trying to do this.
So do we think, as an example, that the Broad project wouldn't have cooperated with us and wouldn't have planned to keep the exact same number of reduced as greatly as possible street closure days if they weren't assessed this fee?
I can't speak specifically for the Broad project, but the intent is, and there are contractors out there, and construction is profit motivated, and if I am a contractor and I can shut down the street and save money other places, even though I'm impacting the community, yes, I'm sure there are contractors out there who would pick that over the impact of the community.
So I don't know if anyone has criticized this particular concept, because I wasn't really that focused on it prior to coming to this committee, as just being a way to try and exact some additional revenue on behalf of the city.
No, the intent is to be revenue neutral. We're trying to cover the fees, but we do not try to make any money off of this, absolutely.
Before we did this, were we losing a lot of money on these kinds of issues? So we must have been doing a lot of the same kind of planning. And so if it's revenue neutral now, were we losing money before?
Well, before we had this program?
Yeah.
Well, we weren't really looking at it that
We still tried to
way.
minimize the number of days and had interactions with developers.
Right, and I mean, I have to be honest, I don't know how it was done before 2003, after this was enacted. I'm familiar with what we're doing now. I can't answer what, if it was revenue neutral or not. I'm not really sure that we had the TCTMC at that time.
Okay. Mr. Parks, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a couple. One thing, and I think I remember what drove this in 2003 was the big push of having the gridlock and construction during the midday hours. And so that was the big push, and the community was upset, just like fixing potholes in the midday. And I think that's what drove it. My concern, and I agree with the process, I think it's important that you have some coordination, because not just from project to project, but also that the driving community that may only drive through that area, on their way somewhere, is not unnecessarily impacted by on their drive time. But the two things I had a concern about is looking at the criteria, and when we talk about the issue of traffic flow. One of the items you mentioned on page 2 of your report is you say, if you give up a parking lane, it doesn't impact traffic flow. Well, I kind of disagree, because if you give up a parking lane, then where does that traffic go as they're searching for a parking place? They're in the traffic flow. And the statement is somewhat inconsistent with what DOT has told us for years, is the reason we wanted to manage meters better downtown is to stop people from getting in the traffic flow and telling them directly where a parking space was. So it does impact the issue of traffic flow. The other thing is, and this is an issue that we run across in the 8th District somewhat, there's a tendency that when DOT or Bureau of Engineering talks about traffic flow, we kind of put all our energies in traffic flow. We forget about what may happen in the sense of people not having the ability to park. What does it impact the business community if you strip their parking away from them while you are allowing the work to go on and the parking is missing? Just like we deal with currently, where kind of cavalierly MTA says you're going to lose 300 parking places on Crenshaw while we build the line. Well, nobody's concerned about that except the people that shop on Crenshaw, the people that go to work on Crenshaw, and the people that drive on Crenshaw. So these are things I think we have to be a little bit broader, I would think, in looking at how we assess these issues, and not just cavalierly say parking lane basically doesn't contribute. It contributes greatly if you're going to circle the block 8 or 9 times to get to that business you want to get to. So that one I have a concern with. The other one, when we say we try to encourage them or incentivize them to go to nighttime or weekends, I don't think we can ignore that nighttime is one of those issues that in close residential areas, there's a major complaint about that. And whether those variances are kind of assumed they're going to occur, but just saying go to nighttime often creates a dilemma in the community that they then come up even more aggressive against the project because now, not from the traffic flow, but from the noise. And so I think we got to be considerate of both of those, that nighttime isn't an automatic. It may reduce the traffic flow, but it creates a heck of a noise problem if you have a residential area close to a major street. And the second issue, during the traffic flow problem during the day, it's a major issue of cutting out a parking lane that makes people get more into the traffic flow. So those are my concerns about the process. I think in dealing with knowing how it got evolved, I think it's more than appropriate to have a committee sit down, particularly when you're having multiple projects in a certain area. But we always have ignored the public in the immediate residential business community, often get ignored when construction goes on. And I think this was set up to give them a voice, or at least have some consideration for them. But those are the two areas I would like to make sure when you're talking about flow that we just don't believe that the parking lane doesn't create it, it does, and that we not just ignore what nighttime construction does for noise, not traffic flow, but for noise.
Yes, and I don't disagree with you. Absolutely, parking does, taking out a parking lane does affect the businesses, and we see that just in our, construction projects that we do. It's a problem. Again, though, we don't have the discretion to charge them. We have to follow the municipal code.
I understand. I'm just saying the process is, that two parts of the process are of concern, but I understand it's in the ordinance, and you're just following the ordinance. It's just, we'll have to minimize that in another fashion.
Now, the night work, and you're absolutely right about night work, it does disrupt the communities, or it can, and they do have to go through the extra step of going through LAPD, as I'm sure you're aware. Mm-hmm. So, there should be discouraged, or they shouldn't be allowed to do night work where there is a big impact to residential communities. Whereas downtown or in commercial areas, they should be able to do some work at night.
I have to say, I like the way this sounds. I was unaware of it before. I think I get the purpose of it, and I appreciate that Mr. Parks gave us some history of it. When we start doing more work to modernize Los Angeles International Airport, or we finally get a train that connects to the airport and we start doing all that major construction work, I want something like this for the benefit of my constituents and for the passengers who are trying to get to the airport. So I think that there are various ways that, this is prescribed by ordinance, and I've certainly heard sentiment here of ways that this could be a looser program, or this could be a tighter program where it could be changed, either the fee structure or the composition of the committee or the balance of sensitivity to nearby residential communities. But this motion was to ask for a report on how it works. So my feeling is we've gotten that report, and that various people should consider those findings, and if someone wants to then bring in a motion that abolishes or tightens or changes, that would be the way to go, would be my recommendation.
But Mr. Michael, you haven't firmly answered all the questions because you don't have all the answers, correct? So I would ask we continue this 2 weeks. When's the next meeting?
In 2 weeks.
No, your committee.
Oh, the committee
Tomorrow?
meeting? It's every Thursday at 9 o'clock.
Thursday. Where?
In the Public Works Building, first floor.
First floor. Give me a chance to drive by just to see it.
Sure.
If anybody else wants to drive
it's
by.
open to the public. Anybody's welcome to sit in. It's on room 100 of the Public Works Building every Thursday at 9 a.m.
But I would like to have more history. I think Mr. Parks, if the years are correct, the big driving force with the discussion is no construction during peak hours.
Well, not peak hours, during day.
No, but this was a big era in 2002 of the impact of peak hour construction, which now we sit people down and they don't work. They get paid, but they don't work. And I think that has to be reviewed as we look at what we're going to do to try to achieve our infrastructure. Do you know what year, Mr. Chairman, the Purple Line's supposed to get west of Fairfax? Just guess. It's 2013 now.
2025?
2023. 2023. You're going to be retired in 2023.
He's predicting 2023,
No.
so 2025 is probably a lot more likely.
Whatever the case may be, that's a long way off. And I think if we're going to try to be true to the constituencies, because mobility is a key issue there, I think we should really study this in some sense to try to have expedited action for safety, number one, for those who are working on the site, for those who are driving near the site, and the impacts on neighborhood and how it could be done. In other cities in the northern part where they have longer hours, they work 10-hour shifts, when they got the daylight. They get less daylight in the winter and fall. I'm talking about northern European countries. But we should look at some of these things. If we're going to achieve what these propositions are, and also Water and Power does want to replace a lot of their main lines because they have, it just did on Laurel Canyon, Coldwater Canyon. So if you could hold this for 2 weeks just so I could find a little more, why not talk to Gary Lee Moore? And I don't know if anybody, the trouble with ERIP is a lot of the veterans who knew the history, who were there at the history are gone now, so we could try to find that out.
Okay, well then we'll continue it for 2 weeks. If you could provide some supplemental information to address some of Mr. Labange's questions,
Yeah.
and then he'll have an opportunity to go by and visit.
Okay, if I could request that we get some clarification. I mean, I know that you had asked, what does Long Beach or other cities, that they have this fee, council member? Do you have other questions that you'd like us to
Yeah, what does
answer?
BOMA think? Well, just get 5 letters that say, I'm Johnson & Johnson Construction Company, and this is a good thing. I get quick service. Or they could say freely they find that it's difficult and it doesn't make Los Angeles business friendly. I think that's a fair thing, just to see what the
So just see what the
business
contracting community thinks about this?
Right. They support it. I mean, I'm not going to jump into it if they support it. As you said, Michael, you think this may be a good thing, but I have some concerns. Thank you.
You bet. And the clerk points out to me that we have 2 additional public comment cards, Brian Hansen and Ellen Isaacs.
It may be a contract. Looks like a broad shoulders.
Hey, how are you? I'm Brian Hansen. I'm the Southern California partner for Wood Partners. We have a construction project at 8th and Hope, 290-unit apartment multifamily building that started construction in September 2012. It was first brought to construction, or we tried to start construction in 2007. We were about 2 weeks away from pulling a permit. We had the financing arranged, went through all the approvals with the city, and then the economy just fell on us, and we put the project on hold. We revitalized the project in 2011, rearranged our financing, and moved forward with it and started construction in September of 2012. While we were putting together the financing, obviously we did not know that Hope was going to be reclassified as a street of significance, so we arranged it with our equity partner, CB Richard Ellis Investors, and our bank, that under terms of the prior street closure fees, and for our project, we're incurring a cost of approximately $250,000 that was never assumed in the project. So I think, going forward, while we still feel the $275 a day is a little excessive, we would at least have the ability to underwrite that and include it in our costs on our project, and I think it's similar with Related and Broad. We didn't have that ability to underwrite these fees, and then they just came at us and put us in a situation where we just didn't have the capital to cover it.
Thank you. Ellen?
Hi, I'm Ellen Isaacs. I'm here on behalf of Metro. The motion seems to be focused primarily on developers working around Metro projects, whether it was the Gold Line way back when or the regional connector that's now undergoing utility relocations. So my sole purpose, for the record, is just to seek assurances that the motion will not lock Metro into any particular fee process or permit process, will not result in delays or increased costs to the project, and to ask if the limitation to downtown is for a particular purpose.
Because we're going to continue this 2 weeks, let's
Yeah.
answer those questions in the report back.
Okay.
And just to underscore, the motion before us doesn't actually change or propose doing anything. It's actually just a report on how things function. So if you could just put that information as well as the additional information Mr. Labange seeks when we report back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to skip ahead a bit to item number 4.
Item number 4 is a Bond and Buscaino motion instructing LADOT to report relative to the city's abandoned vehicle program, including but not limited to protocol, number of complaints per district per month, staff response time, compliance rates, and the number of vehicles that are impounded on an annual basis per district.
Thank you. This is actually a motion that I submitted in response to complaints I get from constituents a lot and from my field staff saying that there is an inconsistent application of rules against abandoned vehicles. Sometimes a constituent will report it and they'll get immediate attention and 72 hours later it'll be dealt with. Other times constituents will say it's been 2 weeks, nobody's come out and tagged the car. And, I take to heart what our mayor has been saying about the importance of having metrics. So, whether it's how long it takes to fill a pothole in the city of Los Angeles or how long it takes to deal with an abandoned vehicle, I'd like to figure out where we are now so that in a few months or in a few years we can evaluate how much better we've done or how much worse we're doing. So if you could go ahead and...
Very good. Thank you, Council and committee members. Greg Civelli, Chief of Department of Transportation Enforcement. We did some number running to try to answer some of your questions today, as well as we will follow up with more detailed information. On average, we handle 50,000 complaints a year of abandoned or vehicles stored on the street. Just for anecdotal information, districts with the highest number of complaints are 11, 2,
Shocking.
14, and 15. The districts with the lowest number of complaints are 8, 10, and 9. Reports or complaints are taken at our 1-800 abandoned number, and for those that are interested, that's 222-6366, 800-222-6366. 85 to 95% of the vehicles that we mark are gone after the first mark, or moved, I should say, moved after the first mark. Our most common mark is a chalk mark on the tires that indicates the vehicle's abandoned. We do have other methods, but that's the most common. Year to date, we've towed over 2,200 vehicles, towed and cited over 2,200 vehicles citywide. Our average response time, and this is something we will work to improve upon, is 6 days. Citywide, it's 6 days. It's higher in some areas depending on where it is because of, like, the valley's got farther to travel, or the central area has more priorities, and I'm just going to talk about that.
6 days from a constituent calling and it being chalked, or 6 days until it's towed?
Chalk. From the 1-800 number phone call to the time that we actually put a chalk on a tire is a mark on the tire is 6 days.
And then how much long after that, then you have to let it sit for 72 hours?
Correct.
How often does it get checked 73 hours later?
That's one of the numbers we're trying to get. We don't have that number, but generally we have it. It's entered into our devices. Our devices tell the officer this one's ready for a citation and an impound. They go back on the 4th day. They give it a citation. Then we have to wait by policy for 24 hours more before we impound it, because the citation then serves as the warning that we're coming to take your car. And so that's the policy that we have currently. We can change that if we wish. On average, we have towed about 180 per district. The need for our response to improve obviously is there, but one of the reasons why we have a slow response time is the priority of the call. When you compare that to our needs for enforcement, our revenue demands, and our calls for service, abandons does not bring in a lot for us. It's a service call. We want to provide that service. But that's one of the reasons why it falls down on the priority list. And other things such as traffic control for accidents or homicides or fires or things like that, they take priority. So if an officer has a stack, to go mark, and he gets called to do an emergency or some type of crisis event, he's not available to do that. So that's another reason for some of our delays. Our enforcement activity basically causes a rotation of the vehicles. It doesn't really resolve the issue. When I was the chief of police, I would go to neighborhood watch meetings and I would ask everybody, how many people here have garages, with a show of hands? Can we raise our hands? How many people can get their car in their garage? And the number dramatically decreases. So what we have is really a demand problem, and that's what generates this. And when people can't park in their house, they want to park in that spot right in front of their house, and it becomes their spot. And a lot of our calls, we've learned, is that the resident doesn't get their spot, and they park, someone else parks there, and then they call and report that car. So again, all we're really doing, 90% of the time, as I mentioned, they're moved, is moving the cars around, not necessarily impounding. A couple other causes for the problem that we have is bordering jurisdictions. Other cities that border the city of Los Angeles have overnight parking restrictions. So if they can't park overnight in their city, they're going to move over to our city and park in ours. And then our demand for PPDs also narrows the district for parking for those particular neighborhoods. So surrounding neighborhoods have to move to other neighborhoods. So that's kind of the problem that we're running up against in this issue. But let's see. Currently, what we're doing to improve our response time is we're evaluating with our contractor on who documents all these calls for us, is where our low officer activity is. Is it in the overnight or is it in the early morning, where we can assign these officers to focus solely on abandons to try to get them to move a little quicker and get our response time down. Again, as you know, as we narrowed our size of our organization and had a higher demand for enforcement, we have taken away from some of the specialized program. We used to have a specialized program that did just abandoned vehicles. So with that, I'm prepared to answer any other questions. And again, we can report back, as you suggested, in a couple months with updated information and see if we lower our response time to these calls.
How many traffic control officers do we have in the city of LA?
We have 570 full-time officers that do both traffic control and parking enforcement, and we have 150 part-time officers that do enforcement only. They're not qualified at this time to do abandons, and that's another avenue that we're looking at.
And about how many are actually on duty at any given time?
At any one time, there's probably approximately 400 during the daytime hours, and then we have overnight shifts that go beyond that.
And when you were talking about it, on average, it takes 6 days to respond to the constituent call, and then the car gets marked. Do you have yet, from you're looking at the data, an average amount of time it takes to check back on the car once it's been chalked?
Yeah, that's one of the questions we have not been able to answer. We should be able to get that data from the tows, where the citation is issued prior to the tow. So we've asked our vendor to provide that data.
Okay. I like the things that you've outlined so far in order to improve response time. I think those are good things, and I was going to suggest. Colleagues, questions?
Yeah, you're about 2,100 cars, you say, get towed for abandoned a year?
Year to date, January to now, 2,200 cars citywide. About
How many
100
cars have been towed with the Tiger team, or if that's still the reference, peak hour restrictions?
Oh, I don't have that number in front of me right now.
Would you guess? I'd love to know. More than 2,100, you think?
No, it's usually less.
Yeah.
We get
So
a lot
people, can you get compliance? This is the highest cars you tow, abandons, more than anything else, more than Wilshire Boulevard, 3 to 7.
I would have to look also at our special events. When we do a special event and we have temp tow parking, we do
Right.
tow a lot of cars there. I can give you a report back on where.
You can just, when I see you, it's a very effective administrator, so I appreciate what you're doing, Chief. Thank you.
Mr. Parks?
No, I was just wondering, look at what's the difference between an impound and a tow?
That's one of the problems with the data. The officers have two choices in their handheld device. They would push tow or impound, and it was really just up to officer discretion or what they came across first in the handheld. We have now modified that to just have tow or impound, one of the two. I'm not sure which one they narrowed it down to, but that's the problem.
And that's to say the same thing, though, right? Because if you
Right.
tow a car, you impound it.
Correct.
Thank you.
We don't know why it was set up that way.
And Mike, you just mentioned discretion. Okay, say I just walk in the door right now, come out of the door, and there's the car, the officer's there, what discretion do they have if you're there, and do you give them any discretion? Once it hooks up, it's no way?
Yeah, once the tow service is there, they're entitled to the vehicle.
If they're hooked up, or?
If they're there. Basically, they're there. They hook up within seconds, but generally they are there and they've got their response. We have an ability to do a drop fee at the location, and they don't have to take the car. But they are entitled to something since they are there.
I got it. How often do they find out how to do a drop fee? I mean, there's an old saying there, Michael, that Singapore is a fine city. You drop a cigarette butt, you get a fine. You do anything, you get a fine. You get a fine, you get a fine. The guy told me that once on a train. He said, "It's a fine city." I want to be a fine city, but I don't know if I want to be that fine where every time we got a chance to hook somebody up, I want to have a little compassion. We are the city of angels. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, the officer has to...
No offense to Singapore, if there's anybody from Singapore here. I hope to go there one day and not get a fine.
I got no comeback. I got nothing. Mr. Koretz, do you have any questions? Just one last question for you.
Just, if I could...
You notice that a number of the vehicles are just cars that move around. It's people who just want a car not parked in front of their home. But the ones that ultimately get impounded or get towed, some of those are genuinely abandoned vehicles, which is the purpose of the program. Are there any things that you can sort of tell by stereotypically looking at the vehicle when you chalk it, whether it's a newer vehicle or whether it's got a smashed window or something like that, so that the ones that you think are more likely to be abandoned vehicles are more likely to get a return visit right after the 72 hours as opposed to 6 days later?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I neglected to mention, of that 50,000, 9,000, nearly 25%, are marked by our officers on view. In other words, they see a car that's obviously abandoned to them, they mark it, they remember it, they go back in 3 days, and they cite it, and then they tow it on the fourth day. So we do quite a bit of that, of on-view marking of the vehicles. If there are vehicles that are obviously disabled, engines gone, wheels up on jacks, things like that, we can tow that as a safety violation immediately.
Okay. Thank you. So I look forward to a more detailed written report, and I think what I'd probably like is some update of that report in this committee, maybe 3 times a year, just so we constantly view the metrics. Okay, so with that objection, we will just approve the motion. Thank you. Okay, item number 2.
Item number 2 is the CAO to present a verbal status report for discussion purposes only regarding the awarding of contracts for the operation and management of city-owned parking facilities.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Oh, shoot. Ida Rubio with the Office of the CEO. This committee considered a report at the August 14th meeting released by our office, which recommended that DOT be authorized to enter into contracts with 3 firms for the operation and management of 24 city-owned parking facilities. As noted in our report, 16 of those lots are currently operated by GSD and would impact city employees. This committee asked for a report back in 30 days, and we are still working to finalize a written report to address some of your concerns raised at the last meeting so that there's a certain level of comfort to allow us to move forward with this process. This report should be ready for the next meeting in October. General Services, Transportation, personnel, and the CAO have met on several occasions over the past few weeks, either as a large group or in smaller groups, to discuss the issues and challenges related to the potential employee placements and the transitioning of these lots. As mentioned before, the placement for these employees will be similar to the convention center model, which was approved by council for placing full-time and half-time employees, which Personnel Department is currently working on right now. In these meetings that we've had, Personnel Department has raised a concern that it would be preferable to delay the GSD placements until the placement of the LACC employees have been finalized. The deadline for the LACC placements is slated for December 8th. Personnel is concerned that concurrent placement would be difficult for them because there are similar classifications in both departments. The LACC placements have been moving slower than anticipated. We're hoping that the December 8th deadline will not change for that process. We should have a better assessment in December of where they stand with that. But we do hope that at some point, either in December or shortly thereafter, that the GSD placement process can be done concurrently so that these lots can be transitioned over, particularly because there is a revenue and expenditure impact to the city with any future delays of implementation. We've also met to talk about a tentative operational plan on how the lots will be transitioned out. They could potentially be transitioned out in 4 phases. However, part of that would also be contingent on the placements with personnel. The next step is to meet with the unions, and we are putting together a proposal to share with them to address their concerns at the earliest date possible once we finalize all these moving pieces.
Have you met with the unions yet at all?
We have not met with the unions yet. Lastly, we are also working to update the revenue and expenditure information related to these lots, primarily because there's been a delay in the implementation of these contracts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just sort of a word of explanation to colleagues and folks in the audience. This item was before this committee in mid-August, and there were a number of questions raised, so we asked to continue the item for a report back, and we agreed to 30 days. I knew prior to calendaring this today that the report was not done, but my practice is going to be when we continue an item for a set number of days, we will ask the departments responsible for it how long they anticipate that will take, and then we're going to have that back on the agenda at that timeline. And if it's not done, I just want to get an update of what's going on. So I appreciate that you came forward today. Next time, if the department needs a little more time, please let us know in advance. We would have done 6 weeks instead of 4. I will say that given that we had given 30 days, I'm a little disturbed that the department has not yet met with labor, because that was one of the main elements of the report back. So that's concerning to me.
Okay.
Colleagues? Oh, we do have one speaker. I may as well call the speaker up first. Solomon. Charlie.
Hi, my name is Solomon Charlie, present our fellow colleagues and co-worker from GSD, Parking Service. Well, I'm just here to, on the first, say that, make sure, that you look through it thoroughly, everything that's going to happen, just due to the fact, like Chicago, what happened in Chicago, the parking, they privatize it. They only made $1.15 million, compared to $85 million just went, to the private sector and people. Also, I just want to say that us as workers for the city of Los Angeles, we accepted furlough days, we accepted a lot of every obstacle that, transfer different shifts just to, stay with the city and, have these lots open and taken care of. And I also just want to emphasize too that, the city workers, everybody came to support. A lot of us not here today to basically voice our opinion, of the thing. I just want you guys to make sure, look thoroughly through everything and make sure that, there's no loopholes in the thing. And take consideration, there's 60 people basically in line to get, relocated. We don't know how long it's going to take. It's going to affect a lot of lives in that. That's my opinion about it. And also, I collected a couple of letters from different businesses around my neighborhood where I work at, stating that they want the city to be there. They are not happy of, contracting out these lots, and a lot of people are not happy with it, from my speaking to a lot of the owners of the stores and stuff. That's what they told me. They're not happy with what the, contracting out to a private company.
Thank you. You can leave those with the clerk if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we had one more speaker who just put a card in. Richard, is it Robin? Yes. Sorry, time's up.
I'm done. That's it. I spoke at the last hearing. I'll keep this very short. My name is Richard Robbins, and I represent Parking Concepts, Inc. After that hearing, I actually sent a letter to each of the committee members. The letter is dated August 27th. I'd like to submit a copy to the clerk. It's a really short 2 minutes. I'd like to submit a copy to the clerk so it becomes a copy of the formal record, if that's okay with you.
Certainly. It's not working.
I'll give it to him afterwards. And I just want to make our point very quickly, which is these proposals were submitted December 2nd, 2011. It's almost been 2 years. If we go to December 8th, it will be more than 2 years. Legally, they're not even acceptable. I mean, they can't be accepted because they expired after 1 year. And in the last 2 years, and it's covered in the letter, a lot has happened. And we covered some of it. After that happened, the minimum wage has been raised. After I sent my letter, the minimum wage has been raised. The city I think it was just yesterday, adopted a provision relating to having bonds for the parking occupancy tax. So much has gone by, we think it would be irresponsible for this committee and the city not to take into account everything that's happened in the last 2 years, and those are covered in the letter, and we'll probably do a supplement to cover things that occurred after the date of the letter. Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, I have some questions, some of which were mentioned in passing just now.
Can I wait for that? Or?
I don't need to have you wait for it, but I know there are a lot of legal questions about the fact that it would appear the RFP has expired. Has anyone gotten a legal opinion from the city attorney as to whether it is legal for us to accept a proposal that's expired, or whether we need to reissue the RFP, or what the proper legal process is?
Just briefly, yes, the city attorney's office was consulted, and we haven't heard any facts that would present this from going forward.
Say it again.
We haven't been presented with any facts that would present this RFP from not going forward. Actually, the RFP was issued as Mr. Robbins stated, in December 2011. The Board of Transportation Commissioners, who had the authority, approved the selections. The thing that's in front of that is going to be coming before the council is just the approval of the contracts, which is required because of the amount of money involved and the time period of the contracts themselves. So the RFP process, that portion was completed back in December of 2012. However, we have had other RFPs. The issue is not the time length of when the RFP was issued, but whether there's been a material change or in the scope. If we were required to change the scope of the RFP, then you might have to consider actually sending it out again, but that's not the case. We haven't heard any facts that there's going to have to be a change in scope. It is my understanding that pricing and changes in pricing were actually incorporated into the RFP when it was issued. I've received information, I believe, from somebody named Mr. Roberts, some questions that he had, and just to state that these are questions that should have been in front of the Transportation Commission at the time that they were making this selection. They're really not entirely appropriate for council. But the city attorney's office, right now, the opinion we have given is that because we have no facts in front of us that suggest that this can't go forward, it can go forward.
I'd just like to interject. There was a period of time where there was where firms were allowed to protest, and that time frame has already passed, and we did not, to our knowledge, there was no concerns raised at that point in time.
Right.
I mean, I know there have been changes along the way. I don't know if they're significant enough for us to consider as material or not, things like proposers merging and changes in the minimum wage and other things that one could take into account or not.
As far as I know, DOT, when they reviewed the proposals, it was based on the information that was submitted at that time.
Right.
If there's any type of risk involved, the new operators would have to take out a bond that's required by risk management that would protect the city against any type of liability. Proposers also have to take out, I believe, another type of bond related to ensuring that the deposits are received by the city.
how do we handle proposers merging during this period?
That I can't speak to. I don't know if Mike or the department can speak to that.
I believe there's one case where proposers have merged during the process.
I'd have to study that. I believe if they notified the department of the merger and provided the information to the department, unless it altered the actual bid or the ability to perform the bid, then it might be an issue, but I can't advise on that without further
I
information.
assume they have different proposals, so somehow they have to,
yeah.
we have to assess that somehow.
Right. They'd have to be unable to fulfill the bid that they made. And there's no information to suggest from that, as far as I know, of what the city attorney has seen, to suggest that that bid is invalid.
Can you just report back definitively on that when they come back with the report on the 9th?
I can have the department look at it to determine what was done.
Anything else, Mr. Kretz?
No, I think that's
Mr.
it.
Parks?
Let me just clarify a couple of things. One of the speakers mentioned earlier that issue of privatizing. Is this deal privatizing the parking, or are we just getting management to run the parking lot?
Some of these lots are already operated by private operators.
But they're city lots. We're not
Correct.
we're not selling them.
No.
That's what I wanted to know. And then the other thing I wanted to know is that the issue of what's the expected revenue for this fiscal year?
For this fiscal year?
Yeah.
For 2014, it's 17.
2013, 14?
Good afternoon, Rene Sagalas Parking Facilities Division, Department of Transportation. The expected revenue as computed for FY14 is about 16 plus million.
How much?
16 plus million.
16?
But the base of that is that the new contract was supposed to be implemented in July of 2013. Now, we have worked with the CAO. We're working to revise that because since the implementation has been will be put on hold and based on the most, I would say, calculation or estimate is December to the third quarter of the year. So we would have to
That cuts it in half?
I hope not. But we are looking probably at, we're using FY13, which is at about 15 million. So our experience is that we will be still at the level of 15 plus million. And then the increase would be a result of two things, the operational efficiency and aggressive marketing and the upgrades of parks. So we have to adjust.
Let me just stop you on one thing. If we expected 16 million,
about almost 17 million in 2014.
and we're not going to implement it, we're going to be 6 months late implementing it?
That is correct.
Okay, then how do we come back and say that we...
Well, we have to make an adjustment in our computation and work with our existing current operators to be able to mitigate the...
I mean, are we saying that you have the ability to work with them and come out with 16 million over 6 months versus 16 million over 12 months?
Well, we are expected to at least be at status quo at 15 million, which is the 15, almost 15.5, I believe 15.6 million, which is the FY13 revenue. So the additional projection that we have for FY14 was a result of the new contract due to the change in the parks equipment and aggressive marketing plan and at the same time operational efficiencies. So that portion will be the one that would have to be recalculated, and we have to work with existing and see how we can mitigate the probable loss.
You're confusing me. One thing, in talking about timing, are we talking about July 2013 through June 2014?
That is correct.
That's the 16 million.
That
Is that also the same period for the cost are implementing the equipment and technology.
That is correct. That was the basis in 2014.
So it's your belief that if approved by December, you'll be able to implement all this in the 6 months of 2014, that will bring the 15 to 16 million in a 6-month period versus what we were projecting in a 12-month period?
We will recover at least half of that 12-month period increase.
You're saying now maybe about 8 million as opposed to 16 million.
I'd also like to interject. I believe that 3 of the 24 lots have already been upgraded. So some of those anticipated revenues from those 3 lots are calculated into the $17 million that he's talking about.
I just need a better figure so that if we're talking 3 lots or 24 lots or 6 lots.
3 of the lots, Hollywood and Highline is our biggest revenue producing lot. Hollywood and Highline has already been upgraded. So that revenue from that lot is already anticipated in the 17 million that he's referring to.
Okay, but that doesn't change if we go to a different management structure?
It will decrease, Councilmember Parks, because the projection that we have for the 17 million for FY14 includes the implementation starting July 1st of 2013. Since we will be 6 months delayed, that 6 months would have to be incorporated in our projection such that if we were using the base FY13, which is we have 15.5 million that we earn, so we could probably just hit about 16 million, 0.2 to 0.4 instead of the 17 million, because the 6 months that we were supposed to get all this additional revenue due to the changes that we anticipated will not be implemented.
I would just need a clearer picture because if we can do 16 million in 6 months, then
no, we won't be.
I just don't know how we project for 12 months and then say we can make it up at 6 months. So
Councilmember, David Hirano from the Office of CAO, maybe I can help. The $16 million is an annual figure for the revenue.
It's what now?
It's the figure for a full year's worth of revenue.
Okay, yes.
There is
and that's for all of the lots.
Yes, there is a difference between the adopted budget, which assumes that the management of these lots would be turned over at an earlier date than is happening now. And the difference is not only on the revenue side, but on the expenditure side.
True.
So as Ms. Rubio indicated, we're still in the process of calculating what that difference will be, and that difference will be based upon our assumptions as to when this will actually occur during the course of the fiscal year. So we will come back to you with our best estimate between the CAO and DOT as to what those changes are, and we will let you know as soon as we're done with that, and we will make any recommendations for budgetary adjustments at that time.
Okay, then let me
My
ask
guess
the next
is it would be somewhere around the mid-year.
How much money did you put in the 13-14 budget and allocate and spend? How much did the city recognize?
The cost profile for management with GSD is slightly different than with the contractor. I think it was approximately, how much was it more a month? Remember, was it?
For the year? It's about $90,000 a month.
Yeah, so right now, we are spending a little bit more than we had projected during the budget, and there's also a revenue differential. So we'll work that out, and we'll come back to you with a fully fleshed report and options
When you
for...
bring the contracts back?
I'm sorry?
Will that information be when you bring the contracts back?
Yes.
Okay. The thing that I'm unclear on is that if we have basically looked in this year's budget and we are expecting 16 million and we recognize that and we spend it in this year's budget, and then we also probably in this year's budget decided these 20 whatever number of people are no longer on the payroll.
Correct.
So that cost continues and we drop our revenue.
You're exactly right, and we don't know the full net effect of that yet, but we will come back to you with that calculated, and that'll all be determined based upon what we think the timing is going to be of this full transition.
Okay, if you could do that when they bring the contract, because it was unclear last meeting about what our expected revenue. We've heard figures of 16, we've heard people projected 70, we've heard all kinds of numbers. But if
Understood.
we already start spending it July 1st, and then we had also decided we're not going to have these bodies on the payroll, again, we're dealing with loss of revenue, and then it's costing us.
You're correct.
Okay.
So,
That would also hopefully hasten these reports coming back, because if we're expecting money in the revenue, in the budget, and it's not coming, some adjustment's going to have to be made somewhere down the road.
that's correct.
Okay, Mr. Kretz and Mr. Labange both have questions. We just got one more speaker card from Mr. James Johnson. So why don't you come up, and then we'll do the last round of questions.
I won't be long. James Johnson, SAU Local 721. Just one thing that the committee needs to understand is that also in the case with the convention center, as well as the case if these contracts are let and go through, there is contract language in all the coalition of city union contracts that say that if the city does contract out these functions and ultimately this work, that it's the obligation of the city of Los Angeles to help identify jobs for these folks. In the fact with the convention center, the reason why there is nothing really moving is because there's more than 90 people who want to remain with the city of Los Angeles. Where are the savings? The same issue is going to be with this. When you get down to the numbers and get to the nitty-gritty, and I know that Councilmember Parks is a master at this, you're going to find, I'm not so sure you're going to save a whole lot of money, and you're going to basically, do away with the jobs of people that you see every day, and you know the kind of work that they do. So this is an issue that's not going to go away. This is an issue that we're prepared to fight because we believe that it's not right, and that in the final analysis, the cost savings are not going to be as significant as one would hope because of the fact that the 60 people, I can guess based on the experience we have at the convention center, 90% of those folks are going to want to remain with the city for a myriad of reasons. Right now, with AEG, they're trying to get some of the folks to stay, particularly some of the top managers, and folks are saying, what do I do? What do I do? Because there is a clear difference. And so we have to be real sober about this. I'm frankly troubled by the fact that folks want to contract out this work, yet they can't answer basic questions about the revenue, because at the end of the day, if it's about raising cash, they have to be able to answer some of those questions, and it doesn't seem like you've gotten many of those questions. Hopefully, by the 9th, we will. We'll be prepared. I hope the folks that want to do this are as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Labange and Mr. Kretz.
Is there a parking administrator in the Department of Transportation?
None, sir.
Wasn't there one in the budget? Where did they go? They couldn't find a place to park? Is there one planned to be in the department?
Not to my knowledge.
Wow, that's news. You didn't know that, Michael? Did you know that? Yeah. Parking is very important to have someone, and I have the benefit of the first public-private partnership when I worked for the late, great John Farrar. It was on Largemont. They pulled out 2 meters of the old Safeway driveway, and then they, instead of replacing them with a curb, we got this private structure, but city forces handle it, and I have no complaints from the community or not. When you have smaller structures, your CAO?
LADOT.
LADOT, CAO. Do you look at the Hollywood and Highland in one hand, and you look at Sherman Oaks, Largemont in another? CAO? Or do you look at them all together?
I think we allow the department to manage the lots in the way that they see fit.
But you're looking for revenue, which is the job of the CAO. Okay, and then as we try to balance it out, would you, if you could get Hollywood Highland tonight, would you want Hollywood Highland and let the other ones go? Or Hollywood and Cherokee? Do you want big lots only, or what is your interest?
Obviously, our intent would be to concentrate on the larger lots that are revenue generators.
Higher revenue generators. So, but also there's community lots that are there that there's an important, there's a community awareness of some of the lots that we run. So I'd like to separate and look at that. Okay, I could look at there's big dollars coming to the city if that means that there's an operator, Hollywood and Highland, Hollywood and Cherokee. What other big lots? Pershing Square, or is that Reckitt Parks?
Reckitt Parks.
Why don't you take that over? Is the mayor's representative here? You know, I mean, if you're really talking, let's talk about it all. That's why we need a parking administrator to look at it, whether it's Record Parks or somebody else. So look at that and try to decipher, because I think and I don't know if any of you are from Larchmont at all, work Larchmont, it's usually a few people. It's not a high number of people. I understand that there's a challenge when we all have gone through this reduction. So I need that from the CEO's office to say, look, we're going to go after Hollywood and Highland and run it in such a way that brings back a bigger dollar in that sense, as opposed to trying to put them all out, because I think there's some opportunity for continued service for people who have filed for that. But also at the same time, I think what Mr. Johnson said, forgive me for this, I closed my eyes for a second. The way you were talking so loud, you reminded me of one guy who comes in public comment, but I won't tell you his name in City Hall, but he lives in Venice. Okay. Don't take it as offense, take it as creativity, because you got such a radio voice. But here's the situation.
Whom?
Look at that, exactly. Look at that issue, and then let us know what could be. And also, as Mr. City Attorney, I'd like to know the words it says, whatever we do here, then we're responsible by ordinance or by contract or whatever, that any displacement of those who are now working currently for the city must have opportunities to fill other posts. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kretz, and then Mr. Parks, and then this will be back on the 9th.
Yeah, a few questions. When we do this, is the city going to remain in control of pricing? Or is the consultant or the person that we lease this to going to be in control?
The contract, the operating contract stipulates that it's only a management and operation contract. Control and jurisdiction over these properties remains with the city. As far as Hollywood and Highland is concerned, it's under City Council. The remaining 23 is with the Board of Transportation Commission.
I know particularly in Westwood, there's a lot of concerns that Westwood Village is struggling and that we might jack up the rates and disrupt recovery there. Also, a concern that we could lease that property not to everyday customers, but to other long-term concerns, and again, devastate the recovery in that area.
Council member, we're working with your consultants and the bid of Westwood Village as far as Broxton is concerned. In fact, I have a meeting with them on Monday.
Very good. I have a much bigger question, which I think Mr. Labange was sort of nibbling at the edges of, which is we started looking at doing this whole process sort of out of desperation when the city was broke. We're not really broke and devastated any longer. I think we can make calmer and more careful decisions and not be worried about every single dollar. The question is, we don't have a parking manager. Could we just hire a parking manager or a consultant and find that we could improve our parking management of these lots and our revenue generation without having to make this huge disruptive change, but keep the same people in place and simply hire a consultant or an in-house person that could really focus on maximizing revenue with the existing system?
I second the motion.
I'm not sure it exactly was a motion, but it was a question.
I didn't hear it as one.
They weren't answering. I was trying to help.
Well, a question and a possible exploration. I mean, have we looked at whether we could accomplish the same thing without causing the same kind of disruption that we're talking about now?
I believe the goal of the RFP was to look for operators that could bring in new technology to help with parking issues and to also create revenue efficiencies. And as part of the proposals that were submitted, the evaluation committee felt that those vendors that submitted proposals could bring about change.
Did we ever look at a different approach as part of this, of having a vendor or a consultant try to bring about some of those changes, but like I said, without the kind of shift we're talking about, without eliminating all of our employees and that are working in these positions now, and trying to bring in some technologies that wouldn't cause that.
Council member, the RFP has been written in such a way to incorporate all technological upgrade, both in terms of equipment, parking applications, and other technological instrument or equipment that it's out there. And what we have added, because of SPRF has run out of money because we've transferred all of it to the general fund, is that we have worked in a way where the funding of these upgrades or installation, as the case may be, will be fronted by the companies who we have selected, and we will amortize the cost so that it will not be at the cost of the city, because at this point the cost of installation is really expensive. The cost has gone up. We will get it through the revenue, but you can't get it in a year. It takes time. We have to that's why we amortize the procedure for us to be able to do so. And we have looked into that, sir, about consultants and so on. We feel that based on, without tacking the cost to the city, the pass on is to the parking operators.
Thank you.
There's also one more thing. I mean, there certainly is the possibility, particularly as the cost of money remains historically pretty low, that we could make those purchases ourselves and borrow the money and repay it as we would, and that wouldn't be a massive expense because the cost of borrowing is not that high right now. So I don't know if we've considered that as a factor.
We can work with the CAO as far as financing using probably MICLA funding, and that we can incorporate in the system that we're in.
Mr. Parks, you had another question?
Yeah, I just hate to go back in history, but I think one of the things the reason we're here is we went through that experiment of looking at privatizing the lots, and that didn't go through. But I think the real issue is that a couple of years ago, the CAO came up with a report that said that parking is not a core responsibility. And I think that's what put us on the path to say, why are we running parking lots when it's not one of the, I forget what report it was, but it was one that talked about what should be our core responsibilities in the city. And I think we went back and forth on this issue about employees versus technology, whether we hire a parking administrator or a private company bids. If you put technology in, either one of them are going to eliminate people, because the cost of running parking lots is generally people. The technology is a one-time expenditure that you use for years. If any of us have parked recently in a automated parking lot, they not only tell you where the parking place is, they also give you a ticket there and take your ticket and your money, and you don't see any people. So whether you go parking administrator or bid, the winner of the bid, the whole premise on technology is to eliminate overhead, pension, medical costs, and salary, where you can buy a machine and will do it in automation. And one of the things I'd hope that we also learn from the convention center, we changed the process a while back because somewhere down the line the council said that you could only charge $15 for parking at the convention center. So when there were major events around the convention center and people were charging $25 and $30, we were charging $15. And then when there were no events and people were charging $5, we were charging $15. And so I would hope that we give some discretion, if this moves forward, that the operator of the system can measure the cost of the parking based on what the events that are going on in the area and what they're competing with versus a standard cost that we lose on both ends. And so, I think the council approved way back when that the belief that parking was not one of our core responsibilities, and why we're moving in this direction and why technology is so important is that you don't have to pay a medical plan, a pension plan, and a salary to technology on an annual basis. And so I think that's why we're here today with this proposal. If we unravel it and start all over again, we not only have to find the full amount for the budget that's already been allocated, we have to keep paying the salaries. And it kind of reminds me of years ago when we were going to save literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in revamping our workers' comp program, but at the last minute, we saved 25 jobs that we're still paying for, and workers' comp is still going off the map. So I think at some point we have to pick a decision and a choice and a direction and move forward. And if any of us park in parking lots, the technology has changed it dramatically. If you find a person in a parking lot that taking tickets at a podium, you will find that that is probably decades-old technology as opposed to parking lots basically running themselves.
So we will have the report October 9th. We will be back in...
David Haran from the CAO. With all due respect to my colleague, I think it will take a little bit longer than the October 9th to come back to you.
What date?
I think it would be reasonable to expect at least another 30 days. We need to sit down with the union, and we do not want to rush that meeting.
30 days from now or 30 days from October 9th?
From now.
Okay. That's fine. As long as that's the date certain, we will have the written report that will be back here. And to my staff and to CLA and to the clerk, let's keep the agenda light that day because this will be a time-consuming item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is our last item. That's the Labange-Bonin motion instructing DOT and Recreation and Parks to report relative to the Griffith Observatory's public transportation plan and the feasibility of extending the current operating dash shuttles to run on a daily basis as opposed to limiting its access on the weekends.
Good afternoon. Brian Lee, Department of Transportation. I'm here to respond to the request to possibly extend the service from just weekends to weekdays for the Observatory shuttle. In 2006, LA DOT did run the service on the weekdays, but we found that with low ridership and low demand, the service was canceled. Currently, we do have a good service, running about 1,000 passengers on a weekend on Saturdays and Sundays between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Currently, the service is doing very well. Like I said, we have had some discussions with Department of Rec and Parks, some initial discussions regarding their how busy they are. It appears that they're the busiest on weekdays from Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, and the lightest busiest on the weekday on Tuesday. In addition, we've had some discussions with them, and it appears that their busiest times are during summer, winter, and spring breaks following the LAUSD schedule. Again, we've had to look into some options running just the summer, winter, and spring break hours, or possibly Friday night and a possible Thursday night, or additionally running additional weekday service, which is approximately $250,000 a year. Our last discussions with Rec and Parks, they currently do not have any funding sources available to help extend this service. And that concludes my quick presentation on this.
I would like to say, Mr. Chair, this is a good report. Look at the LA Unified School District. It's $250,000 to run that.
Weekdays, sir.
So that's all that. But what about LA Unified schedule, like tourist schedule, like holiday schedule? What do you have on that? What's that cost?
We currently don't run holidays during weekdays hours.
I know, but you mentioned it. Mm-hmm. You said basically what's happened now, it's so popular that people are parking halfway down the hill and it's unsafe. So giving some options, I'm trying to look for options. So what you said in working with Recreation and Parks, they're telling you that on high tourist season, summertime, or spring and fall break, LA Unified break, is an increase. Have you found out what it would cost to run those times?
We were currently looking at those. We were going to come back with some cost estimates for just running spring break and holiday hours, basically, during...
Why don't we have them study that as well? If they could study that as well and then come back on that, because I think it would be good. And you come from the subway stop?
I have, we've looked at it. I haven't personally gone from the subway stop up to the observatory shuttle.
But the shuttle comes from the subway stop.
Go
yeah.
from the Vermont Sun.
Right, right. And also, I see James here, and James, what do you think I'd like to see? Open air trolley. And I know, you ever been to San Francisco? You ever been to San Francisco?
Yes, I have.
Go to Pier 39. They have rubberized wheels on what looks like a cable car. And I do believe more people would jump on it because it's more fun looking. In our coastal cities, there's shuttles, and when they're open air, they see them packed. When they look like a box, I don't see them as packed. So if you could look that as well.
Yes, sir.
Be careful with those trolleys. The utility relocation costs will kill you.
No wires, rubber wheels. Thank you. Thank you, DOT.
Mr. Koretz.
I was just going to actually ask Mr. LaBonge if you remember the Fairfax trolley, and
I do.
that
I
was the same. I think the same concept.
Right.
Why? Do you remember why it disappeared? I don't know what happened to it.
Well, I think there's different changes that you had, and the DOT had other dash lines that they tried to operate, which is okay. But I think open air gets people out of their cars, and demographics change in neighborhoods. They say the demographic in the area around Farmers Market has gone down from an older demographic to a younger demographic. People will jump on those things because it looks like fun. And you got to make transit fun. And instead of 1,000 people, you get 10,000. Guaranteed. Do it for a year, I guarantee it. Okay? And the next
Caruso cars, right?
No, that's over at the 3rd and Fairfax, but that's another place. Thank you. But I want to work with you on that. I don't understand why we don't have an open air trolley. People see it. It's very positive. So thank you.
Park?
I was just wondering on DASH in general, when do you do your needs assessment? Is that annual?
We're currently taking a look at our most popular routes right now, and we're going through a dash needs assessment as we speak.
On the most popular?
Most highly used.
Highly used, but what about adding on those decisions?
What we will do is we'll probably take a look at what's most use out of all our routes and what's not used, and take a look at where we can either expand service and delete service.
Is that done in concert with what MTA does when they evaluate routes?
I believe they do something similar as well.
I mean,
They can
do we
look
do
at
it the same
ridership.
time sequence?
I'm not sure what time sequence they're on.
Because I would just hope that as the lessons we learned from using Prop A and C money and got overburdened, that we look at adding or subtracting in the annual process or semi-annual process so that we're not doing things incrementally.
And that dash needs assessment, when will we see that in committee?
I'm not sure when we'll see that in committee. I know we're working on it now.
James knows.
Okay, so we'll approve that motion, and that wraps up the regular agenda. We have one general public comment card, Dennis Hinman, Toluca Lake. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Dennis Hyman. I want to talk about, I know we're renowned to have one of the most congested street system in the United States. Unfortunately, we're incapable of expanding it for cars in terms of parking or moving lanes. New York City has been working on, since 2007, reallocating the space for pedestrians, transit, and bicycling. And they've been measuring at every point of the way, the effect on business, the effect on the level of service, and also the safety level. They've found improvement all across the board. Bloomberg is very big on data. So in our case, we're working on transit. Unfortunately, the transit corridors are going to be opening up under Measure R. According to a UCLA professor, is not going to keep up with the population growth. So we should be considering very seriously concentrating on reallocating that enormous amount of space devoted to motor vehicles. I know Caltrans already deals with it. They just shove the cars onto the street. They don't, if the freeways are nearing maximum capacity, they go onto the street. So in terms of bicycling is considered a low modal share. It actually is. So many people think that doesn't have much potential. But if you measure, look at the ACS data from the Census Bureau from 2007 to 2012, bicycling commuting modal share grew more than transit. And you go all the way to 2005 to 2012, comparing bicycling growth rate to transit, it's 40%.
15 seconds.
So the bicycling is needs to be not overlooked. It is being overlooked. The growth rate, you need to keep an eye on how much it's growing in comparison to the amount of money that's being spent on transit, and it's not being done. So data, keep your eye on the data.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you.